The Los Angeles Clippers were red hot in December and January, and it seemed like they were poised for a deep playoff run as they were playing their best regular season basketball since acquiring Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. But now they are either in Cancun or doing exactly what we're doing, watching the rest of the playoffs on TV. It turned out they peaked too early, and I think for sure their championship window in the 2-1-3 era has closed. I think the lesson to be learned here, it should have been learned from the 2013 and 22 Lakers, but some people still seem to not get it. Putting big names together on a team does not guarantee you anything. This era as a whole has been a colossal failure considering the high expectations that the team had as soon as they acquired their two stars, and the team has only been to the conference finals once this entire time. Of course, the injuries are an obvious reason, but there's more to the Clippers' problems than just that. The problems start at the top with the front office because of their lack of patience. Lawrence Frank has overstayed his welcome as the Clippers GM. The fact that he still has a job, what the hell are you doing, Steve Ballmer? Lawrence Frank did a solid job rebuilding from the Lob City era when he first got the job as the president of basketball operations, but his bad front office decisions all started when he gave up too much to get Paul George just to convince Kawhi Leonard to join. Then he just tried to bring in big names to surround the stars rather than staying patient. Last year, the Clippers did not take the regular season seriously enough. Nicholas Batum even went as far as saying don't expect anything crazy from us until Christmas, only to lose in the first round of the playoffs. Then when the Clippers realized you cannot cheat the regular season this year, Lawrence Frank got impatient and decided to trade for 34-year-old James Harden even while the team was doing just fine to start the year, and this raised their regular season ceiling, but Harden was never a championship player even in his prime. The way I see it, and this is not to hate on the Clippers, I feel the same way about the Lakers, but let's stick with the Clippers for now. The longer the Clippers wait to rebuild, the longer this team is staying in a rut. I understand it may be hard to rebuild right now because of all the draft capital the Clippers traded to OKC, but I really believe there's no way this rendition of the Clippers can win a championship. This rendition has run its course. It seems like yesterday when the Clippers acquired Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and became the most hyped up team in the NBA, yet they've only made the conference finals once since the two of them have been in LA. It already seemed like the Clippers were taking a huge risk by giving up a future superstar in Gilgeous-Alexander and a multitude of first round picks. I don't think anybody could have predicted that SGA would be the player that he is now back then, but he did show potential in his rookie year with the Clippers as he made the all-rookie second team. He just needed a few years to become the superstar that he is now. Not only that, one of those picks the Clippers sent to the Thunder turned out to be Jalen Williams, who's become a really good complimentary second best player to SGA. On top of that, the Thunder also have the Clippers first round picks this year and in 2026 and swap rights with the Clippers for their first round pick next year. At the time, this was doing whatever it takes to get Paul George so Kawhi Leonard can come to LA because Paul George was the co-star that Kawhi wanted in LA so badly. It didn't seem like such a bad idea back then. 5 years later, just one conference finals trip this entire time. I understand it was such a great feeling for Clipper fans to finally get to the conference finals for the first time in franchise history in 2021, but just once throughout this era that had such high expectations from the beginning. Now Paul George could be an unrestricted free agent this summer while the Thunder have already built a strong foundation through this trade, with SGA easily surpassing Paul George as a basketball player and OKC still having more potential assets coming in from the trade. Yeah, the Thunder definitely fleeced the Clippers here. It's not even just that though. Lawrence Frank also felt such a need for a point guard that he went for John Wall, who hasn't been healthy since 2017, over Isaiah Hartenstein, who's been doing amazing things for the Knicks and his impact goes way beyond the box score. Or also trading a draft pick that turned into Cam Whitmore, who's been doing pretty well as a 19-year-old coming off the bench for the Rockets, for Eric Gordon, who's 35 now and out of the league. I can't believe Lawrence Frank really hasn't been fired yet. He's only doing everything to hold this team back, and Steve Ballmer should be blamed too for letting this go on. This team is in a rut and it absolutely will stay that way until they rebuild. I'm very firm on that. Now let's talk about the faces of this team. Yes, it's important to surround your stars with the right pieces, but at the same time, if the stars get all the credit when the team wins, they deserve blame when the team loses too. Starting with Kawhi, coming off a historic finals run leading the Raptors to their first championship in franchise history, there's no way the Clippers can fail now with the reigning finals MVP joining them, right? Him and Paul George now leading a team that already won 48 games without a legitimate superstar the year prior. The whole time it's been nothing but not being available and coming up short. I thought it was great for Kawhi to finally play the most games he's ever played in a season for the Clippers this year, but then he wasn't available when it mattered most. The 2 playoff games he did play, he didn't play up to his standard, and the Clippers lost both those games. At this point, if he just can't be on the court when it matters most, and it doesn't even matter if he's being load managed or not, the Clippers are better off looking to trade him and getting some draft capital back to move in a new direction. I doubt they will because they just signed him to an extension in January, but he's not getting you anywhere. When he is available, he's still a great player, so someone might bite, but he's not available enough to win a championship anymore, and that 2019 run in which he played 60 regular season games is looking like an outlier now. All he's doing is stealing money from the Clippers, and knowing his availability is always going to be questionable, especially when he's turning 33 next month. Giving him that 3-year extension was a terrible idea. Or if trading Kawhi isn't an option, he should just retire and leave all the money he's owed on the table so the Clippers can spend that elsewhere. He's already a sure Hall of Famer anyways. This is the 3rd postseason Kawhi ended up getting injured in. That includes the one time the Clippers got to the Western Conference Finals 3 years ago. The only time he was fully healthy, he was great for most of the postseason, but the last 6 quarters of that playoff run, not just Game 7, but the second half of Game 6 too, he had a lot to do with why the Clippers had what may be the worst playoff meltdown in NBA history when they blew a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets in the bubble. We all know about the infamous Game 7 where he not only shot 6 for 22, but also showed terrible body language. I still don't think going after Kawhi back in 2019 was a bad idea, considering he just led the Raptors to their only championship in franchise history that year, but giving Kawhi an extension in January of this year for 3 more years because the Clippers had a great regular season stretch was definitely a huge mistake. Kawhi is also to blame for his impatience. He demanded the Clippers to get Paul George in order for him to sign with them, and the Clippers gave up way too much just to get PG, who we will talk about now. Paul George is one of the most talented players in the league. If we showed his highlights to someone who knows nothing about basketball, it'd be easy to convince that person that he's the GOAT. However, there's a lot more to basketball than just a few highlight plays, and the problem with PG, he doesn't have what it takes mentally to really be a winner. He's not aggressive enough, doesn't have a go-to move, he settles for contested jumpers too much, makes the most careless turnovers, over dribbles, and he's a pick-and-choose defender. When he does shoot, he tends to go for the highlights rather than the simple plays. It's like in baseball when you swing for the fences. He has such a great skill set, but just makes the game so much harder for himself. Worst of all, he deflects blame way too much, and that is not what winners do. How is Anthony Edwards, who's only 22 years old, so much more capable of holding himself accountable than someone who's 34?
I wasn't aggressive. I blame myself, but we'll be ready Sunday.
And why weren't you as aggressive?
I don't know, man. It's on me. I'll take the blame for this loss. I came out with no energy at all. I came out flat, so and I can't afford to do that for my team. I let my team and my coaches down, the fans down. So I'll be ready Sunday.
I don't think they necessarily did anything different. I think the difference is we relied on too much isolation basketball, and when you don't make shots, like, you don't have a chance in hell to win. And I think we relied on too much isolation, which their whole game plan was to load up and force someone else to make plays and force other people to shoot. So they were sending multiple defenders. They were plugging. They were, forcing, kind of like, shutting the lane off by coming over and fake doubles, sending doubles. Like, I think they were mixing a lot of coverage up, which was making it hard to catch a rhythm. Whereas Game 4 and our win in Game 1, we played a lot faster. It was a quick pace. that's like how you got to be. The best teams right now and the teams that are still playing right now are young.
Even before coming to the Clippers, Paul George has had some terrible playoff lows in OKC. That only got worse when he came to the Clippers. Still, Kawhi said, "You either bring this guy in or I'm not coming." Hard to say no when this is what the reigning finals MVP is demanding, and it backfired. After a miserable 2020 postseason that got him dubbed Pandemic P after going into the bubble saying his shoulder's feeling good, he at least redeemed himself for a year by getting the Clippers where they've never been in the history of their franchise in 2021 by leading them to the conference finals while Kawhi was injured. That may be the greatest achievement of Paul George's career. After that, he proved he's not quite good enough to be the best player on a championship team. He scored 28 points per game in the conference finals, but very inefficiently as the Clippers lost in 6 games. Then it seemed like if the Clippers can just get both of them healthy with Tyronn Lue coaching instead of Doc Rivers, this team can win a championship. But it turned out that was where this team peaked. Some bad luck happened too, as while Kawhi was recovering from his ACL surgery all year in 2022, Paul George was injured for most of that season too. The Clippers still managed to get the 8th seed that year, but then missed the playoffs after losing both play-in games, and Paul George tested positive for COVID right before the second play-in game. After that, Kawhi and PG were load managed for much of last year, only for Paul George to have a season-ending injury right before the playoffs, and Kawhi got injured during the playoffs. Then this year, Paul George brought back Pandemic P in the playoffs this year. Paul George just isn't built to win a championship. Now we'll talk about the 2 other future Hall of Famers that were brought in more recently in the 2-1-3 era, and we'll start with James Harden. The Clippers got Harden in the first place as insurance, knowing that their 2 best players are injury prone, but at this point in Harden's career, he's really just a pick and roll merchant who just doesn't have the burst in him to score like he used to, and even in his prime, we all know he's a playoff choker. Yeah, maybe as a third option, this could work, right? No, not if you want to win a championship. Only if just making the playoffs is your end goal. Harden's ball dominance, even as a third option, makes the offense stagnant, and that was true when Harden was in his prime in Houston too. In games 1 and 4 without Kawhi this year, that plan to have James Harden as insurance seemed to work well, but as usual, when it comes to James Harden's playoff lows, this year's came again late in the series. Harden did average more points per game in the playoffs than in the regular season, which is usually not the case. It does look good on Basketball Reference without looking at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is that the first 4 games carried his scoring average. You know what else is usual about James Harden's worst playoff games throughout his career? He had an amazing game right before he choked in the worst way. That happened again. He scored 33 on 70% from the field, including 15 fourth quarter points in game 4, a game Kyrie just seemed unguardable in, but the Clippers pulled away with a win thanks to Harden's heroics. Harden followed that up with 7 points on 2 for 12 from the field, 1 for 7 from 3, got to the foul line just once, and committed 4 turnovers in game 5. Then in game 6, he scored 16 points on 5 of 16 from the field and 0 for 6 from 3. Harden's over dribbling not only made it easy for the Mavericks, whose defense is much improved from last year, to load up on him, it's also taken guys like Amir Coffey, a 38% three-point shooter during the regular season, out of rhythm, and it's a terrible fit to have with Russell Westbrook on the floor, who I will talk about in a moment. Before I talk about Russ, we can't talk about James Harden without mentioning how he doesn't always try hard enough on defense, and even when I made that video praising the Clippers when they were red hot earlier this year, that was something I said should be a concern for the Clippers way back then, and here we are now. It's all these things and it's stuff that dates back to when Harden was in his prime too, that makes me not think nearly as high of him in the all-time ranks as some do. Let's not forget that Nicholas Batum and Robert Covington, who were 2 of the Clippers' best defenders, were traded for Harden. On top of that, Harden is an unrestricted free agent this year. He's not a championship player, so bringing him back would not be worth it, but at the same time, the Clippers could lose him all for nothing, so trading for Harden was definitely a lose-lose situation for the Clippers. The Clippers not only gave up 2 of their best defenders to get Harden, but they also tried to counter that by including PJ Tucker in the trade, and for his career he has been a great defender. Now though, he's just too old, and when he does see playing time, it's just cardio for him and nothing else. And now we're on to Russell Westbrook. As selfless as he was to come off the bench, and he was the more vocal leader out of the 4 future Hall of Famers on this team, he really isn't that much better of a fit on the Clippers than he was on the Lakers. He fit fine on this team before Harden arrived, but once Harden arrived, that completely changed. When the Clippers struggled mightily upon Harden's arrival, and it became clear that there just aren't enough basketballs for 4 guys who all need the ball to be on the court together, I really believed Harden should come off the bench. Even though Russ decided to come off the bench, he got minutes with the stars, and both James Harden and Paul George over dribbling as much as they do had Russ standing in the corner to settle for shots he can't even make 30% of. Harden and Westbrook just really shouldn't have been on the court together, but if you really had to do it, Russ should be the one bringing the ball up the court, because at least Harden can shoot. Even if Harden's not as willing to take the catch and shoot threes as he is willing to take the step back, it's still a lot better than Russ being baited into shooting threes at all. The Thunder had their success with KD, Russ, and Harden because all 3 of them were really young at the time, and Harden was a guy who was willing to play off the ball back then. In Houston, even though both need the ball to be effective, at least they were still in their 30s and a lot more explosive back then than they are now, so they were at least able to get their team to the second round of the playoffs, which is still better than where the Clippers are now. With Russ having a lesser role than he's ever had in his career, he just feels too much of a need to make an impact at times, and sometimes he does even without scoring, like he did in game 1 of last year's playoffs with his defense against Kevin Durant, but he can also let his emotions get the best of him. He definitely did in this series, having the crowd baiting him into shooting and getting ejected from game 3, in which he shot 0 for 7 from the field in. Russ has a player option this year. If the Clippers will bring him back or not really should depend on how he's being used. I don't think Russell Westbrook is ever winning a championship because even if he's selfless enough to accept a lesser role, his inability to adapt is something that holds him back. Russ may be 35, and even though I don't view him as a championship player, if he does pick up the player option, I think it'd be foolish to not at least look into trading him. I'm not saying Russ definitely will get traded, but I just think the Clippers should at least look into it. I'm sure a team who just wants to make the playoffs may want to take him. Now on to Tyronn Lue. Yes, he has some flaws, but he has done a better job for the Clippers than I thought he would when he first got promoted to be their head coach. He has yet to coach a fully healthy team in any year he's been at the helm, so for that, I think he deserves a little bit of slack. That said though, he should get a share of the blame too. What the hell was he doing starting PJ Tucker in game 6? The guy was once a great 3-and-D player, but now he's old and useless. He belongs in a nursing home now. I know Mason Plumlee was getting cooked in game 5, but what happened to Daniel Tice being your backup center? He only played 4 minutes in the first round when he was your backup center all season. Or also, Ty Lue's too caught up with modern basketball. The Lakers gifted the Clippers Ivica Zubac for nothing in 2019 before Kawhi Leonard and Paul George arrived, and Zoo has proven to be a solid post player. I've even heard him get called Gilgeous-Alexander a few times while watching Clipper games after he hits some hook shots, yet Ty Lue doesn't utilize his post game enough and settles for pick and rolls and isolations for the stars. Or last year, Ty Lue left Marcus Morris out for dead when he was playing terribly rather than benching him like he should have. I still think maybe you can give Ty Lue a team where he knows that his best players are going to be available on a consistent basis and see what he can do, since he was able to coach this team to the conference finals at least once, and had Kawhi been healthy, the Clippers were very likely at least playing in the finals that year. The Clippers are moving into the Intuit Dome next season. Sure, it'll be harder to sell out games with a rebuilding team, but for the first time since the Clippers played at the LA Memorial Sports Arena, how many of you even know that that's where the Clippers played before the Staples Center was built? They have their own arena. You don't think that'll bring fans to a game? The Clippers saw an increase in fan attendance in the inaugural season at Staples Center, even with a 15-win team. If you want to keep running this thing back, be my guest, but I just think doing so is just a terrible idea if you want this franchise to go anywhere, and I don't think it's the end of the world if not all your games are sold out in your inaugural season at the Intuit Dome. Look at teams like the Nuggets, Timberwolves, Celtics, or the Thunder, who the Clippers got where they are now, or the Warriors when they had their dynasty. Notice something about them. They were built from the ground up through the draft. The Warriors weren't a super team until KD arrived. I also think a homegrown team is a lot easier to root for than a super team, even if your team is in a rebuilding phase, than a team that was built artificially and ends up being in a rut. The fans do matter because a team is not a team without its fans, and the players wouldn't be so rich without the fans. I think I could speak for a lot of people from both LA fan bases. As a Lakers fan, no, I'm not a fan of both teams. My channel doesn't just revolve around teams I root for, but I'll be honest with you. Outside of 2020 and last year, I enjoyed the rebuilding years with the Lakers more than I enjoyed any other LeBron Laker team. It was more fun being optimistic for the future with homegrown talent, even while knowing our team was terrible in the moment, than it is rooting for this team that was artificially built and is also in a rut. What do you think the Clippers should do from here? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, liking this video would be really helpful and much appreciated. If you could please consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss another video. Welcome to the team if you're already subscribed. Thanks for your support as always. Links to my social media are down in the description if you want to see my more immediate reactions to what's going on in the sports world. If you'd like to see my most recent video and the one that YouTube recommends, both are up above. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.